Both, where in person is that public hearing going to take place? On September
Well-
22nd?
The one during the day would be here during normal session,
Okay.
and then the other one would be, the proposal is virtual. But the board has to decide that you'll have to, give permission to go to public hearing.
So we're not,
Right.
we're not.
You haven't done that yet,
No, that's what our request was going to be at the end of today's meeting.
Got it.
yeah. And then that
Okay.
would follow through with the rest of the schedule that you see there.
Okay. So with that said, unless there's anything further, why don't we jump right into it where we left off?
All right, well, good afternoon, everyone, and hopefully this will be the last meeting prior to the public hearing. And again, even if there's still additional items, we can still go to public hearing, and then after the public hearing, we have programmed time in to come back and have discussions about anything that you would like to see change as a result of the public hearing, comments that you've heard, et cetera. As long as any changes aren't so far out of the realm of what we've proposed, there's still that opportunity post-public hearing to make changes. So we have done, as Commissioner Rothstein has said, we've gone through all of the text. The text, as you have approved it, as we've been going through, is put on the board here in front of you. We're happy to run through it. There are no additional outstanding items except for the remaining portions that we need to discuss. So is there anything on the text itself, other than remaining portions, that you all feel that we need further discussion on?
And this is the text you got sent up to you on Monday, I believe? Okay, and it's also been on the website,
So you thought we looked at this in advance?
I was hoping so.
Just kidding.
I can run through.
Perused it.
With all the discussion you
No,
had, there
no,
was
no,
really
it's
only, okay. With all the discussion you had, there was really only about 5 changes
Right.
that were made.
Were there any
We've
additional
captured.
comments from the community?
Not yet, no. But Linda, did you want to run through how we planned on kind of reaching out before the public hearing to different groups?
No,
Okay.
not just
Okay.
yet. We'll do that when we get to that part.
Okay.
So, with all that said, the ag remainders.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, if you don't mind, if I could interrupt for a second. There was one item before we move on to the ag remainders that I did have a question on. The accessory dwelling units. So I think we talked, I wasn't sure if it ever got resolved. So if the change is made where you can have a detached accessory dwelling without subdivision potential, that might have the unintended consequence of the situation that we run into often, which is people wanting to build another house on their property, and they do have subdivision potential. They just don't want to go through the subdivision process right now, but they want to build that second house for a child or whichever. If we, as the last version that I saw changed that, they would be limited on the size and scope of that second dwelling on that property.
Well, they would be limited unless they went through subdivision. They still, as far as it being unintended, I think it would be understood that they would still have that option then to exercise their right to subdivide it to do that. So,
Yes,
but you're right.
But the issue is that some people want to build the house, which they're allowed to do under the current code, without having to go through the subdivision process. And then sometime in the future, when the child moves out and they want to sell the property, then they can go through the subdivision process. But they would no longer be able to do that, or, well, they could, but
They'd be
they
limited.
It would be the
limited.
ADU right.
Yes, so I wanted to, that's a consequence I want to make sure everybody's aware of as we discuss the change to the code for detached accessory
Well,
dwellings.
currently, they're not, this is just my question. They're not allowed to build that second unit unless they go through the subdivision process.
No, they
They can
can't.
do it without.
Oh, they can?
They can.
in the
And
Currently,
They can
it's
build any
considered
si-
detached, even though it can be bigger than the original one, so.
But they just have to promise to subdivide it later?
No, they just have to have the subdivision potential.
They don't have to subdivide.
They
You
don't
just
have to subdivide though. And that
Which I-
happens relatively frequently. It's people want, and they build a larger house as a second house and so on for a child, and there's no issue.
But they lose their subdivision right. They
No, they
couldn't
don't.
build a
No.
third
Nope.
house.
No, they
No,
could
They
not.
couldn't build a third house.
Right.
Well, they can they build the second one, they still have the subdivision
Right.
potential,
So
so
they-
they subdivide in the future if they want to.
And they
But
could
just
build a
that-
They still
Right.
have two houses at the end of the day when they subdivide.
Yeah, I think this is actually
No, no,
better
wait,
and tightens
wait,
it up.
Let me make sure I get my, if I don't subdivide, I have subdivision rights, I have 2 rights on this one lot, just to keep it simple.
Yeah.
I can build a second house without going subdivision.
Yes.
But then, and I can sell it separately from
If you
my own
subdivide it.
house. Okay, but if
Yes.
I can't sell it separately from my own house if I don't subdivide. it.
Correct.
I haven't done any subdivision. I can come in and subdivide the property.
Mhm.
Can I or can I not build a third house on that same?
No,
No.
you need to have subdivision potential in order to build that.
So I do get rid of my subdivision potential as soon as I build that second house.
Yeah.
Because I've used it.
Well, it
Yes.
depends how you're.
I've
Yes.
used it.
Yes, you're correct.
Yes.
Yes,
I may
you
not have
couldn't-
subdivided, but I've used my right.
Yeah, you couldn't, I see what you're saying. You couldn't build 2 houses on one property and you've got a one additional lot and then subdivide another property
Right.
off and sell that. You
Right.
need to maintain that subdivision potential with that second dwelling.
So if that was the direction you wanted to go, to retain that right for people, that would have nothing to do with your new proposal for detached accessory dwelling units, as Price just passed on to me, we could call it a secondary dwelling unit and allow them to keep their right to build that second house without subdividing, if that's what you wanted to be able to allow them to do. I mean, I don't know, I guess we were thinking all along, yes, this is forcing them to subdivide for
Yeah,
that
and-
second house.
It just is what it is. I
Right.
mean, it actually has us keep better track of what is happening. And
I mean,
Why do we
certainly
allow
forces
them
them.
not to subdivide?
yeah.
That's a good question.
I don't know if that was the right thing to begin with
And
anyway.
I can understand where there are people that would want to do that, because, I mean, going through the subdivision process costs money.
Yeah.
And if it's just for a child, they just
We
want
don't
to build.
care about-
Yeah,
Just for a child.
build a second house for them, and they're within the confines of the current law that they're allowed to do that.
But there's nothing in the code that says it has to be for a child. It can be for anybody.
Right.
It could
So
be
they
for
can just
anybody.
build that second house. They could rent that second
And you
house.
can rent
They
it
can
out.
even
Yep.
rent it out.
Yeah,
So
they could
that's
even
actually
rent it.
something we were trying to.
Yeah.
But I think from a comprehensive plan perspective and zoning perspective and all that, they have the subdivision potential. So we're not increasing density or anything like that. It was expected that they would someday subdivide that property and that house. So there's no real change to what's predicted.
Right, right, right.
Is this something that shouldn't be allowed to begin with, you think, or?
Oh, I think it should be allowed. I think it's
Okay,
appropriate.
just-
Yeah, but if we change the code how we've discussed it, it would go away. People would no longer be able to do that. And it
Okay.
is something
Without
that-
subdividing. They still have that right to that second home.
Yeah.
That's what I want to make
They
sure
have
is
the
clear.
right,
They
yeah.
could still build that second home for their child. They would just have to go through whatever the minor subdivision process is to create that new lot. That's all it is. So either you want to make them go through the process to create the new lot, or you want to keep it where they don't have to. And we can write this however you would want.
Interesting. Or they could build a detached accessory dwelling with the limitations
Yes. Yes.
that are set forth
Yes.
in the new proposal.
But that wouldn't take away their right then to build that other second house later, because it would only be
Right.
50 feet from their home, and it would be a detached. So that's why I'm trying to make sure we keep those two issues separate, the
Right.
detached accessory
So in
and
that
disability.
case, If I had subdivision rights, I would be able to put that third house, so to speak, on that property. I'd have the main house, so to speak, the little house for the
Yep.
family member, and then I'd be able to subdivide, or not.
Or not.
Potentially, and build that third house somewhere.
Yes.
It gets quite
Accessory
confusing.
dwelling you're talking about?
Excuse me?
The third house would be accessory dwelling, is that why it's allowed? I
No,
don't
the
No,
know.
third
the-
house, so the first house would be, let's call it the main house.
Okay.
The second one in my brain would be this detached accessory dwelling.
Accessory dwelling,
It would
okay.
have to be close to the main house.
Right, right.
Small and.
Small and all that.
But
And
the
then
accessory dwelling could be a house?
Well, it can be 2 bedrooms, 1,000 square feet, 50 feet
Okay.
from.
But it has to be livable. You'd have
Right,
to
But when you
get
say
a unit
accessory
out.
dwelling, I don't think of a house, I think of.
Right.
It's like an
Like
in-law
a
suite.
garage or.
Right.
Correct.
some
It's the same as the
use for
attached, you just pulled
Whatever,
it out.
agriculture, or whatever it happens to be.
Basically.
That's what I think of, I don't think of a house
Yeah.
when you say that, okay.
Yeah, no, yeah,
All right, now I got you.
yeah. And then you could put in, and then if I had subdivision rights, I could put in more houses, house or houses, depending on how many lot rights I had.
Well, I think since we are basically allowing the accessory dwelling, which could be a house, to be built without subdividing, if they want to put another house on there, I think they just have to subdivide first.
This gets into trouble with the next owner. The original owner is usually not the problem. It's when they sell the property, then they have that extra house or part of it, and then they want to do whatever with it, and it is where the problem occurs with most of those. Am I wrong, Jay?
No, what we've run into is after the second house is built on the property, and the first owner wants to sell the property, a lot of times it's investors who want to come in and buy the property with 2 houses on it and rent both houses out, which you can't do. The owner has to live in one of the houses, so he can't rent both of the houses out, but that's what a lot of people want to do.
Because it's accessory dwelling, you can't
Because
rent
it's
both
still an
houses, right?
accessory dwelling, correct.
Now, if they had subdivided, put a second house in there, they could do
That's
anything they wanted, right?
Yes.
That's a total, yeah.
So the subdivision in that case would be beneficial in that point because
Right.
they could rent that out without having a owner
There'd
live
be
in
no
either. Because there
confusion
would
at
be no
all, right.
confusion.
Right.
So in that case, the subdivision is beneficial
It's
in that.
beneficial, yes.
And they'd be forced to any if that was their intent.
So what are you saying, Commissioner Weaver?
Hmm?
What are you saying? I'm not sure where's the problem come in?
Usually, the first owner has legitimate reasons to add that
Right.
accessory dwelling. When they sell the property, or the next owner, or third owner down the road, they either want to sell that house out, they want to rent them, they get themselves in all kind of difficulties with that.
So, but if the next owner comes in, they could rent that house out.
They could rent the one if they live in the
Right,
other.
yeah.
But if they don't, and some of them want to just buy it as rental units.
Okay, but they would know that when they're purchasing the property, though. It's not like we're hiding the information.
No, they wouldn't.
Well, then they should check on it, because we can't tell even if you put all the information out there, they probably wouldn't read it all, but they have to, some of this onus is on them. They have to know what's can and can't happen.
Well, people don't. And I just-
Believe me, I know.
there's a place for them, definitely, but you got to be careful, because down the road, every new owner,
Okay, so what are you proposing then?
leave it basically the way it is. We don't want to have to be up, if they got to go through subdivision, that's going to deter a
So-
lot, but if it's a small house there,
Yeah,
it
but
has
the
to
way-
stay with the other
But
house.
the way it is, my understanding is, if you have a house, put accessory dwelling there, which could be a second house, and then you could actually put another house on that same property. Subdivision was only supposed to be for 2 houses, and now you have 3. So now you're looking at water, sewer, and all that other stuff for three
The other
instead
one's
of 2.
accessory house has to stay an accessory to the first house.
Right, which is why you can rent that, but you can't rent both. But what I'm saying is you can have 3 houses now on the same piece of property that you originally was only intended for 2.
Well, that's where it falls apart, I guess.
Yeah, that's why
That's the whole concept of
Right.
an accessory
Yes.
dwelling unit.
Yeah.
The idea of an accessory dwelling units, attached or detached, are actually allowable increases in density, right? You're allowing some increase, it's
Yeah.
minor, but
Well, not with the current code.
It's that lower
Current
cost.
code,
Because
we
you have
do not
attached.
allow-
But you could have the attached,
Right,
Chris.
it's no different than the attached that's currently allowed.
Right,
You've
it's
just
really not.
moved
We
it
just
out
moved
a
it.
maximum of
Yeah.
50 feet, so it's not increasing the density, because that was always foreseen in the existing code that you could have the attached.
Yeah.
So I would argue it doesn't increase the density.
And you can have a duplex essentially too on
Right,
that
that's the other
property as
thing. In the
well.
ag, you can have a
Yep.
2-family dwelling.
But it provides that lower cost housing for the in-laws, kids, something like that.
Right, I don't have any objections to that.
Yeah.
I don't want, if the piece of land zoned basically for 2 houses, let's just say that. So you could, whether you look at it as a house, an accessory dwelling, or whatever.
You want to take the loopholes out of it.
Yeah, I want to make it just, you can only put 2 houses there.
Yeah.
You can't put the house, accessory dwelling, and the 3rd house.
Right.
Okay.
Or a second house, whatever you
Without
want to look at.
subdivision,
Say it again.
without subdivision potential.
Yes, if you have the subdivision right, are you saying you're?
I think, what I'm saying is if you build the accessory dwelling on that thing, then you're taking your subdivision right. I don't think you should be able to subdivide after that, my opinion. Because then if
That's
you
how
did.
currently how our code is.
Say it again.
That's currently how the code is now.
For a detached accessory.
detached.
Right, that's what I'm talking about, right.
So
But the way we countered that was making sure it was small and close to the house, so that really wasn't the intent.
Right.
Because a detached, a
Wouldn't be able
regular.
to subdivide that.
Right.
Right, it'd be too close to even do that, really.
And it wouldn't be like a full unit. I mean, it's it's much smaller, an accessory to the primary principal unit. And the only difference that's being proposed is that it's offset from the main structure now. So same things allowed as we currently have, but just offset from the main structure.
It could be 50 feet away.
Can you change that to if they do a detached structure, they lose the subdivision potential?
Well, that's the way it is now.
That's the way it
Okay,
is
that's
now.
what yeah,
That's what I'm
okay.
saying.
So currently, you can do an attached accessory dwelling unit, as long as it meets the criteria for attached. And then, but if you want to do a detached, you have to have subdivision potential.
But you don't have to
You lose the
subdivide.
right for future subdivision
Yeah,
by doing
correct.
that.
Yeah.
And you can,
Okay,
and it
okay.
doesn't have to be accessory, it could be a full-blown home, so it's one or two homes.
Okay. I'm okay with the way it is now then.
Yeah. That's what we started with.
I know. 20 minutes later, I got it now, okay.
Director Hines, why'd you have to speak?
I'm just, we do frequently have, now, I can't quantify frequently, but it is a commonplace practice for people to want to build that second dwelling on their property with subdivision potential.
Well,
And
actually,
not go through the subdivision process.
Well, I am glad you brought it up, because this has been educational for me as
So
well.
just so we're clear though, what this does has nothing to do with what Chris is talking about. What now you're saying is we are no longer allowing, as we had proposed, detached accessory dwelling units.
No, that's not what.
Yeah, that's what I'm
So it'd have to
understanding.
have subdivision.
Right. Yes, that's
I thought
exactly
you were
what's
saying
being
you
said.
were happy with the way it was written here.
No,
No, not revised, no, the original way.
he went to how it is currently in the code.
So there, we won't,
I believe it's what I say, yes.
In actuality, it's not a detached.
It's
so yeah,
not
it's not,
detached.
so
We
you
don't have
won't be
anything
allowing
like that.
detached accessory. You'll be
Correct.
only allowing on subdividable lots a second dwelling.
And it could be detached, attached, a full-blown dwelling, doesn't matter. You could have it 100 feet, you could have it 2 feet. It's whatever you want, but we're not having the accessory portion any longer that's detached. That's what I'm understanding. So that's exactly how, so basically no change
Yes.
To the current code.
to the current code.
Okay.
Right, yeah, that's, yes. It's pretty clear.
You'll be quizzed on this later.
Don't. The way it is now, Weaver, that's what we're looking for.
You happy?
He looks happy.
As well as I can
Well,
understand
there's
it,
a,
yes.
there is, I think, some significant pressure out in the world. Now, whether you want to bow to that pressure or not, it's totally your decision. For detached accessory dwelling units without, on properties that don't have subdivision rights. There is, you know, that, you alluded to it, Commissioner Weaver, when you said, you know, smaller homes for, you know, elderly or new kids starting out, things like that, affordable housing. This gives that family that opportunity to do that. It makes it more flexible.
As long as they can't divide them off in the future, they're still part of that home.
Right.
That's
That's-
correct. That's the way is, I believe is written
Yes.
currently or the new revised. And I think just calling something a secondary dwelling unit and making that a use and definition allows for what Chris is asking and pretty much use the definition of what we have now for detached accessory dwellings. That is the secondary dwelling, that you're allowed to have a secondary dwelling on a property as long as you're allowed to have subdivision potential.
And on 3 acres or greater
yes,
for the
that-
detached.
Correct,
Because of septic.
yes.
So if I could suggest, this is a very convoluted topic to understand. Maybe what we can do is table it until the next time we get together, and we could produce some exhibits that illustrate kind of the different scenarios.
So we have done that, Chris, to be
Yeah,
honest.
we
We've
have.
done that multiple times, work session, planning commission, and here. And that's how we got to where this proposal is now. So now I feel like we're going back to the very beginning of when we
Okay.
started these discussions and rehashing it. So I appreciate that, but I think we just need to move forward at this point. And
But you're dealing with slow learners here. So
So for example, Commissioner Frazier, you've been to my house.
Yes.
Okay, so you know my back garage, right?
Yep. Accessory dwelling you have there, yeah.
It is not.
I know.
I couldn't make it one, because I don't have subdivision potential, and it's not considered, even though there's a breezeway, it's not considered attached. So, I couldn't convert that garage into a dwelling unit, as the code stands currently. But if this were to pass, as it's written, the proposal is, I could convert that, garage into a, dwelling unit. Just, that's sort of the idea.
Gotcha.
So it would be close to the house like that, but not attached like those ones down the.
You know, the top left is what we're talking about, being a detached, it has to be so much smaller, it has to be no more than 50 feet. You even have to have the 3 acres even to attempt it, because you need the septic.
Yeah, so I still may not be able to do it because I don't have 3 acres.
One thing
But
also-
the concept, it's just.
And you're in the residential, and we're only talking about the ag.
Right.
Which is
And
important
One
too.
thing also about this whole issue is currently in the county, there are a lot of accessory detached dwellings already existing on a property that cannot be subdivided. Because people take a garage or an outbuilding, they convert it into an apartment without any permits or anything, or without any approvals. And it's on a lot that cannot be subdivided, and it's detached from the house. It's above the garage or something like that. So in a way, this will also take care of that situation, that those illegal apartments that are out there now would become legal.
And it might encourage people to do things with permits and
Correct.
stuff that they, you know, rather than skirting the rules, just a
I
thought.
think the way you went through this originally and in your work sessions, you had it hammered out pretty well. I mean, the way we need to pursue, and you're right, we don't need to go back to this point, but I think, you know, through the work sessions I happened to attend, and it was put together very well.
Thank you, thank you.
Live with it.
So the proposal is to really, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, definitely add one that's separate from, and actually add two, because if the garage isn't attached to livable space, that would also be considered a detached as well.
So the top left and.
So the
middle
top left detached and attached above a garage, the proposal is to allow those.
Only in the ag zone.
Yes, correct, only in the ag zone on 3 acres.
No more than 50
Yeah.
feet from the main dwelling, and no more than 1,000 square feet, and 2 bedrooms.
And conservation.
And conservation, yes.
And it's going to be quite timely too with their age and population, because I think you're going to see more elderly parents wanting to live closer to their
Is that what you were
kids.
thinking about, Weaver?
No respect.
Okay,
Dennis is happy.
I'm okay with it.
That's
Okay.
done. Okay.
Sorry, at the beginning, Linda said that this was going to be an hour, and I took the over, so.
I had a 5-minute spread.
We'll bill you.
Plus or minus. Okay, so we'll go forward as it's proposed currently on the website then. That'll be.
Okay, yep.
Goes to, okay, thank you. Anything else from the initial, before we get into the remaining portions, not ag-remainders, remaining portions? Anything with the text that's been presented? And again, this reflects all of our discussions, all of your comments, all of the changes you wanted to see in the code. So is there anything specific that you can recall? Mira, was there anything else that we needed to come back on?
Not really. The
Yeah.
most significant thing that you made a change in the last 3 work sessions was your lengthy discussion on daycare schools and religious establishments, and agreeing. I
In the
believe,
use table, yeah.
in the use table that they should be conditional in the ag
Right.
district. So that's been changed. A lot of smaller things with definitions of garden center, purpose of conservation district. There's a couple numbering issues, and clarifying about contractors' equipment storage, size limits, things like that. But those are all reflected in there and have been on the website this week.
So is there any further discussion you'd like to have on this part before moving on?
No.
Okay, All right, so the last item then for your consideration is Chapter 155 regarding, I'm sorry.
You'd like it
Yes,
distributed?
please, yes. The subdivision in the ag zone for the remaining portion and what to do.
Yeah.
What to do with those. And so we came up with a proposal. We looked at multiple jurisdictions to see how they handle the remaining portion of ag land after the subdivision of residential rights have been used. So that's what we're talking about, that remaining part of the ag land. And it really does vary. I think Frederick is most close to what we do. But other jurisdictions, they call them residual parcels. Some extinguish them altogether, just there's nothing else once the residential, unless it's an ag use, gone. Frederick is like us, where they have, correct me if I'm wrong, Mary, the other types of rights. Some jurisdictions, we had a really hard time, and I put a survey out to make a understanding, what do they even do with that? 'Cause it's not really cut and dry and clear. I know some jurisdictions are doing what Chris is proposing, purchasing those remaining commercial rights off of that property at a lower value than when you had full-blown rights of residential and commercial. So what we thought would be a good proposal for you all to consider is on page 2 of what Mary just handed out, was limiting the number of subdivisions off of that for non-agricultural and for commercial purposes. So if you look at 4, further the development of remaining portion for the purpose other than agriculture as allowed in 158.07.101 shall be limited as shown in the chart below. For purposes of this subsection, a use shall be considered a single building as defined in 158 or an area for use of outdoor uses. So what that means is, going back to that one example we had with the assisted living where they broke it down into 5 buildings, this would even limit that by building to be 3 buildings, depending on the acreage. Say it was 60 or greater than 40, you could have up to 3 on that. So 0 to 20, you get 1 additional use. 20 to 40, you get 2, and then anything greater than 40, it's 3. So even if you had 100 acres, you still would only get 3 additional bites at that apple for something unagriculturally related.
This is in addition to the original subdivision or whatever came.
Yes, exactly. So this is on the remaining portion only. Yep,
So they've already had
the residential rights, right.
the residential rights off of this. Now you're giving them up to 4 more uses.
Now they're unlimited.
Well, depends
Right,
on
but
the
the-
lot
with this-
size.
Yeah, we're giving them
No,
up to 3.
currently they're unlimited. As the law stands now, if I had a remaining portion that was large enough, I could have a church, a daycare, a school.
We have some of those.
Yeah. I could create my own little city
Yeah.
if I had enough land and enough septic and good stuff like that. What's being proposed is that it would be limited based on lot size.
Wyndhamville.
Yeah, and the preponderance too of what we have in the ag zone tends to be under 60 acres. So it would be self-limiting anyway, but this would also limit the unintended consequence for those larger properties to have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different types of. We haven't seen that yet, but it gets to what your concern was, Commissioner
Is
Weaver.
this only outside the growth areas?
It's all over, growth or no growth
So
area.
this is both of them?
Yes, we're applying it evenly across
But
the
you
board.
did see that there's not, well, we had this map that shows what is in the
Yeah.
So it's limited.
limited to the western part of the Freedom area, pretty much.
And a little bit outside of Tawnytown.
Who really cares about those 2 areas? Just kidding.
Commissioner Wance isn't here, so it's okay.
Actually, in the growth areas that probably should be increased, outside of the growth areas should be decreased.
Well, it's unlimited now.
And it's unlimited, but I'm just looking at this, the growth areas where we want the growth is designed, so you should almost increase the densities there and knock it down or decrease it in the other areas. Does that make sense?
But when you say density, this is just for non-residential uses? I think what Linda talked about
Yeah,
last
yeah.
time is if you wanted to increase the residential densities in the growth
Oh,
area.
For both of them, it goes the same way. You increase it on the growth areas, and you decrease it some on the these remainders in the outlying areas.
So we can't do anything about residential density with this, right? Because it's ag-zoned land. The only way,
1 in 20.
right.
And they've
So-
used up their, well, go ahead.
Yeah,
sorry.
Already used up.
they've used their rights up already.
Okay.
So now complicating this whole factor, even if we were to rezone the properties that are in the growth area, let's say you wanted to give them additional residential density. A remaining portion is very much defined as what it is. It's the remaining portion of the agricultural zoned land. If you wanted to give them more residential density, for simple terms of putting it, you would have to rezone that property.
Would be allowed in the growth area. could be.
But here's what I'm saying, yes and no, because we are constrained by Maryland law with septic tier legislation. So this gets really complex. This is not an easy subject. So anything that has been subdivided after 2012 can no longer, if they've used their 7, whether it's R20 or ag, if they've used 7 lots, they're done. It doesn't matter. I could rezone that property to R40 and they still couldn't get any residential density because of the septic tiers law. It says only 7 rights. So anything that took their residential subdivision density prior to that, and now it's an ag remaining portion, potentially could get 7 more, but that would really be up to how the health department interprets it, and we have not really.
Actuality, I got a response back yesterday from the health department late afternoon where they actually deferred me to the Maryland Department of Planning.
Yeah, so the Department of Planning then would make that
You
because
would have to,
this is the law. This is the law of the land, and we don't have adopted tiers in the county. So I would say that this is an issue for the next master plan. If the next Board of County Commissioners, as part of that master plan process, because that has to happen, you have to have tiers adopted into your comprehensive plan, wants to look at tiers, which are Tier 1 is all your water and sewer areas. Tier 2 is all your potential water and sewer, it's really sewer areas. Tier 3 are areas that have been designated for well and septic development that has additional scrutiny for major subdivision. So that means if you want over 7, when that subdivision comes in, much like we do now through our development review process, but instead of just public comment, you would have to hold a public hearing. And then those subdivisions would be approved after that. And then Tier 4 is your no water, no sewer, no major subdivision area. And the towns have all adopted it in Carroll, just FYI, but most of them are, it's 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doesn't tiers increase density, though,
No.
for the county, for housing?
If you adopt 3, yes, it could, it could.
That's
And
what
what
I-
the state accepts.
Yeah, and because I see tiers, other areas where
Yeah.
the
So,
density
so
goes
why
up.
don't we set the stage for the incoming board in preparation for the next master plan to do what we want, and not just wait for the next Board of Commissioners or the next master plan. You're right, it is a complex problem, but, I don't believe in waiting to create a potential solution. And, if you understand the intent of what I think we're getting to, and that is allowing growth appropriately in the designated growth areas, where these ag remainders are, and there's not that many, and then look at the rest of the county where the ag remainders lie.
And what is the suggestion to move forward in what way then? To set the table, I'm just trying to understand.
To create situations where the ag remainders in the designated growth areas can grow or allow for more residential growth.
But then it would not be a remaining portion.
Okay,
So that's what I'm suggesting. So what, okay, so in order to develop anywhere in Maryland, you have to be, the planning commission has to find development consistent with the master plan. So even if we rezone, let's just say, all of the properties in Freedom that are remaining portions to R40, they come in with an R40 subdivision plan. Tiers or no tiers, the plan says they're ag land. Then developing them at a residential density would not be consistent with the master plan. And if someone wanted to challenge that decision, they could definitely challenge that development decision. And that would be the onus on the county to, it would go to court. I mean, it would go through the process. So to avoid that, what you would have to do is essentially open up either the Freedom Plan, if that's the intent, and have that focus to amend that part of the Freedom Plan, and then still get beyond the tiers issue and adopt the tiers in order to have that happen.
so why not do that? That's my point is, you know, if we
That would be a
see-
vote by you all then.
Right, if we see an opportunity that makes sense to grow further in the designated growth areas, and here is an approach, then why not do that? We may not get to a final solution, but we may have enough preparation for the next Board of Commissioners to then come up with a solution. I mean, I just don't understand why wait, you know?
And that's up to this body here. So for you all, staff will do what we're guided to do. I'm just telling you the process, so.
Oh, no, I
Yeah.
get that, and you're right, it is complex, and there's a lot of different players that are engaged in this, you know, to come up with a viable solution.
Yeah, but it's a separate process from this.
Could
No, I
I,
understand it's a
Yeah,
separate,
yeah.
no, I got it, but this is the catalyst for us to get to starting,
Mm-hmm.
to looking at this. You know, it's not to be so reluctant to open something, but it's in a you know, again, in preparation to going to the next step.
along those lines,
Yeah.
could you keep conditional uses in a growth area and restricted uses everywhere else?
With
Which
the
is-
same zoning? Where's Jim?
With the ag zoning,
Yeah, they both have the same zoning, I'm not sure.
That's kind of in, follows our master plan, 14 master plan, is what we intended, I think, as far as,
I would want to speak to.
I'm thinking no, but.
Well, and that goes kind of back to the week or whenever we had the last, I guess it was last week, when we started talking about conditional use. And we were really saying conditional use is yes, and it just has to go through these wickets, you know?
Right.
Conditional use, in this case, shouldn't just be yes. You know, it should have really conditional, like, the answer may be no, you know, going through this process. But it's understood that it's yes. And if we do that,
So I guess to Commissioner Weaver, I guess one thing, now we're talking two different things here. We're talking the residential component, which I think Commissioner Ralston, you wanted to see these also go to residential. And then there's the whole issue with the commercial component. So let's keep the two separate because I think that's where the tiers thing comes into play is really with the residential component.
except that I believe ag remainders should be looked at differently in designated growth areas than outside designated growth areas. I think that
100%.
designated growth areas should be looked at with their intent.
Well, then I think the point then is, then open up the Freedom Plan and change the zoning on those remaining portions and adopt tiers, and then folks can have another bite at the apple of
Will that
putting.
affect the other designated, or actually they're the towns, it's their business?
Correct.
Okay, let's
can we do that? In what time frame?
At a minimum,
A year.
yes,
Okay.
because, and so,
Yeah,
A week?
no,
I-
no,
Right.
no, but that's right. It would be the next board, absolutely. But if we set the stage in preparation to do that, I think that's a really smart idea.
I have to
And then
agree.
it would be preparing to the next master plan as well. I mean,
So can I offer a suggestion? Can we meet about this topic at a separate agenda time to keep these two
So don't get
items?
convoluted.
Right, because this is a totally separate thing, and I think it might be some different considerations, and timing and other things that we're working on that I just want to bring to your attention, the timeline for future items coming up. So yes, I totally appreciate that and want to give it our full attention, but I don't want that to get mixed in with what we're currently trying to do right now with the ag and conservation.
With the ag and conservation, I think what we're trying to do is, if I got it right, limit the growth in the outlying ag districts and increase it in the other areas. Do we have to open up the master plan to do that also?
The Freedom Plan.
Just
at
the Freedom
least.
Plan?
Well, at least, because the.
it's the only.
Or do we have to
There-
open up the 14
Well-
master plan?
Maybe, because, well, we're starting to redo the master plan.
Which will include the freedom area. I mean, there's a whole,
Yeah. It's a
I
whole
don't want to get
process.
ahead, but we've got a lot of stuff already happening with the future master
It's
plan
okay,
right
get
now.
ahead.
But I think,
It's okay, get ahead, you know, and.
Yeah, I
'cause
have-
You're not convoluting this, you're really not. It really is, you know, one action has impact on another action. They're not, you know, in silos. And I appreciate that, that's what you're doing. So we're looking at something, and it's creating us to now look at the Freedom Plan and the Master Plan in, I'll say another way, but maybe in a more expanded way. So I don't want to say, do this, finish this, and then do that, because
it all has to be done
it has to be done
simultaneously.
holistically. Yeah, it has to be done.
Right, well,
together.
so as Linda said, if she could come back with a whole, there's a whole, she's got her evil plan for the master plan.
She's all rule the world.
Is a whole scheduled, you know, laid out and organized as to where that's going, and it will include the Freedom Plan, so, you know, in a sense.
Right.
So if we could talk about that.
Yeah, I think so, because also, and not to make this issue even more complex, Chris is working on the water resources element, which would fold into tiers, because we got to know where we have water to supply the tier 3 areas, just to make
Why are we talking about tiers yet? It's not
Because if
passed.
you're going to
To
look
impact
for
it.
development more than 7 lots on these remaining portions, they could do 7 lots tomorrow if you just change the zoning. But if you're going to be looking for higher density than that, the board has to adopt tiers.
Ooh, so there's a whole different
Exactly.
And it's a
ballgame into
comprehensive
it, where
plan
you may
issue.
be
And that-
backfiring on what we
And
want
that
to
affects
actually
the
happen.
entire county.
And it would be more than the Freedom Plan, it'd have to be the master plan, because we have to adopt tiers into the countywide master plan and the Freedom Plan, and we would have to give very thoughtful consideration to basically what we're asking for is, where's our sprawl zone, where's our tier 3, where's our major subdivision gonna happen outside of infrastructure? That's really the answer to the question, and where are you gonna put those? And it is a very large undertaking and very time consuming. So that, if we certainly want to go down that road, we are happy to do however we're guided, but that would be the first step to even make any meaningful impact on the remaining portions within the growth area, unless by some miracle of miracles we had so much infrastructure that we could supply water and sewer, and then that's an automatic. And we don't. So we are going to
have a
be
magic
relying on
wand.
well and septic development for these communities.
I'm asking, I guess, a stupid question here, but how does Baltimore County divide their lower portion and the northern
They're
portion?
Erdl.
They're Erdl. They have infrastructure 100% within the urban-rural demarcation line. Everything outside is subject to the same thing that you all have, the tiers.
And they've adopted tiers, I'm pretty sure.
Yep.
Even limited development in the northern portion. I mean, it's extremely
It's
limited.
1 per 50.
1 per 50, okay. That.
And then they have some other little nuances in there, but generally speaking,
1 per 50.
it's 1 per 50 is their RC2, Resource Conservation 2.
Which makes sense here in the outside outlying areas, and here again, leave the higher density in the growth areas, which
Yeah.
they have done.
But
Yeah,
again.
but their
let's-
growth areas have well and water and sewer.
They have
Yeah.
water and
Right,
sewer, but
right.
here again, that could be in the next Freedom Plan with water and sewer if it comes, and no.
No,
To
there's-
extend out
we're-
water and sewer out throughout the
Yeah.
If it
entire
ever
designated
happens, I
growth
mean, you're
area?
talking years.
I mean, that's something we would have to start budgeting and planning for now and
You're
increasing the
talking way out
capacity
years
of the
for
system. It's,
extending
40, 50
sewer.
years, the way our budget's going, but
Well, yeah, I mean, that's,
I don't know.
I'm not
just-
even looking at that part, I'm just looking at,
I do like the
One-
1 in 50. That is a great idea.
you know, because we're talking about one growth area in the county that we're focused on. And setting the stage for that one on how certain areas have been defined, you know, should they be redefined? If they are to be redefined, how can they be supported or resourced?
Absolutely.
With water and sewer, exactly, or, yeah, with water and sewer, let's leave it at that. And, if it is in conjunction with the master plan, which it will be just by timing, you know.
But keep in
It has
mind,
to.
that's gonna drive the budget in those out years too, if we put it in the master plan.
What, trying to put water and sewer out there?
Yeah. I
We're
mean,
never gonna get
Oh,
if we start committing to it, we can be held accountable to it.
Promise you, you cannot afford to put water and sewer out to these
No.
remaining portions that are
Because
in
you're
the
talking
Freedom area.
extending from where they exist now. There's no way you can go from where it exists now.
You're talking miles away.
I know, but if you're a developer in those areas and all of a sudden we start in the master plan with it, they can come back and, hey, you put it in the master plan here, we,
No,
You know.
I mean, unless we automatically said Piney is now used as a reservoir, and that's a whole different story, and I'm not saying that.
Please don't, I don't want to
we're
revolt.
getting way off track here, but
No, it's on the same track as, you know, again, because I appreciate, but, and I'm definitely not saying Piney, is,
I think I
that
heard you say
we-
Pine.
that we need to focus on the freedom in the master plan. We need to initiate that now, while this Board of Commissioners believes it is the right path to go, to set the stage for you and guidelines for the next Board of Commissioners to start making decisions. Because like you said, it's gonna take that much time. You're right, it's not for much of a further discussion this afternoon, but it's getting us to think about what also needs to be put into the designated growth areas.
did Frederick County adopt tiers?
yes.
Oh, no, they got such a mess, I wouldn't want to touch it. Sorry. All you gotta do is ride through the county. That has created,
Unbridled
Where's this?
growth.
Frederick County has created such a mess in that county. And I was wondering why. Tiers are the reason.
And I can't say why, I don't know if they're
I mean,
growing
but
in the
that's-
tier.
yeah.
The densities that they're growing at are on water and sewer, though I will tell you that, because even with tiers, you can't have 2 units an acre.
I
So
do not
what
wanna
they're
go there.
developing is, yeah, their it's within the confines of their infrastructure. So I don't want to comment on how they've done things, but it's definitely infrastructure driven for them.
So getting back to this,
Yeah. What needs to be decided on today? with what you-
So, tabling the residential portion, do you want to put limits on how many uses can be developed on your remaining portions? That's the question.
right, we talked about that last time, and I
Yes.
thought we said that we did want to put limits on
Yes.
it. And I like the suggestion that you have right here
Okay.
for number 4. Is that 4? Yeah, 4.
Which one, Dennis?
So
Number
page
4 on
2,
page
number
2.
4,
At the top, at the
What's in
top.
yellow?
yellow highlighted.
Yellow
Oh,
highlight.
Yellow highlighted.
And Chris has also suggested that we tighten it up by saying that you can't further subdivide the remainder for these uses, because technically you probably could. So we'll have to put that right.
Right,
in.
yes.
I mean, we can tighten up the
Because-
language.
Right, if you could
This language
subdivide it,
is
then you could
perfect.
get another 3 uses out of it.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
Right, you can't
exactly.
just-
However,
Yeah.
I don't know that you'd want to globally say you can't further subdivide that remaining portion, because if you have, say you can put 2 uses, you've got the acreage to put 2 uses, there may be a desire to put those on two separate parcels.
But we could say beyond what's permitted in the table
Yes.
below
Yep,
or
yep, yeah.
something. It's just a
Yep, I
language
agree.
thing, but I wanted to point out
Yeah.
that if this goes to public hearing with this language in, it might look a little bit different after we work
Yeah, we
that
want to
out.
add the subdivision there.
A church and a school,
Mhm.
is that one facility? A parochial school within a church?
It's two.
It's not, they're looked at differently. It's a school or a church. Now, they can be combined,
Yeah.
but
But
It's two
so if they are
uses.
combined, you can't put it
requirements for
on.
church are one thing. Requirements for a school are different in size-wise.
Well, what I'm saying is, for between 0 and 20 acres, you can have one usage. So you're saying it can either be a church or a school?
Yes.
But if it's a church-school combination, which a lot of them are these days, you know, well, I believe,
They are tax exempt, right? Schools and churches are, so they don't help our tax base, but they increase our costs. I mean, I'm
Right,
just,
but
no, I understand,
But this would preclude that.
that would preclude that.
Unless you had 20 to 40 acres.
Right.
Then you can have two uses.
Correct.
Or unless one is considered an accessory use, because the way this is written, it's just referring to the principal uses.
If it's
Yeah.
attached.
If the,
just
if
kidding.
the,
Oh, don't go down that
Greater
path.
if the church is considered, if the church
less
is
than
the
50
principal use of the property, a school could be considered accessory to the church, religious,
right.
education and everything. So it could, like I say, it could be a combination school, church,
Yeah.
or it could be a school or church.
Yeah.
It just depends on what
Yeah.
they're doing.
And this says specifically one principal use, because it's referring to
principal.
07, right?
Right.
So,
getting back to the original plan here, our focus is ag remainders, which the principal use should be an agricultural entity, which is stated here. And we're talking about other uses. I would like to limit that to one use, no matter what size it is out here, outside of the ag use. So it puts the primary focus on agriculture, and anything else, they would have, whether it's 1 or 40 acres, they have one other principal permitted use. And
And that's
that
the way
way
it's
it
written.
eliminates
it's not.
golf, or a town being built out in a residential area, in
You
a
don't want
agricultural
Wyndhamville
area.
there?
Oh, I see.
You don't want Wyndhamville there?
Yeah.
Well, what I don't
No one
want
wants
is that, what we have outside of Westminster, the issues with the music and all the others, and that was whether you keep taking an ag remainder and breaking it down, all these other uses, and that causes a lot of issues with the BZA when they get all these things combined.
So you're saying
I'd like to limit just to one use outside of that.
Well, this, right now, it's unlimited uses. This limits it a great
Yeah, but
deal, I
let's-
think.
Let's limit it down to one
I
outside.
know.
They still have an agricultural use,
I
which
understand
could
what you're
be,
saying, but, you know.
brewery could be 2 or 3 things, but then you have one other. bite at the
Regardless of size of acreage. Switch, regardless
Yes,
of the
that's what
size of
he's
acreage.
saying.
Regardless of size, because they already had their bite at the pie once.
Right.
Now they're getting the second, or maybe third. If they go with agriculture use, they get the second. This would be the third use of it.
How many properties are there out there right now that have multiple uses within like a 40 acres? and
Oh,
above?
that's really hard to determine, because the parent-child relationship's hard to know.
It'd be very hard to determine.
I mean, there's like 1,100 remaining portions
A
out
little
there.
less than that. I think it was
Um,
1071.
How many of them are over 20 acres? We don't even have to know about the other
Well-
relationships.
Actually, we did
'Cause I
that.
thought the majority of them were under 20 acres.
I mean, there's 1,017 remaining portions.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, right now, again, I'll go back to, we're looking at potentially avoiding something, but we don't really have an issue now.
But,
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
but what I'm saying is, like Commissioner Frazier shared, how many are either larger than 20 or even larger than 40? And are there like three or more
Uses.
uses on a more than 40 acres? If there's not, I mean, we're not talking about a huge problem here.
There aren't very many, there are only, if you could scroll back over, it's out of
That's
the remaining
what I was
portions.
saying too, and Mary's gonna go get the numbers for you. I apologize for not bringing it, but most of what we have in remaining portions would be 3 or less anyway.
Right.
Yeah, there
so
are only
we-
16 in total, right?
Pardon me?
Non-residential remaining.
Yeah, there are only 16.
Currently, I'm saying for the
Remaining
future, the majority of them would only be limited to 3 regardless of this, or because we don't have the acre, like, there's just not a lot of acreage of whole properties.
So it doesn't, so you're gonna get what you're saying. It's not,
It's self-limiting anyway.
Right.
yeah. it's-
Probably not gonna be high,
that's
but
right,
just
it's
put it down so it is one.
Yeah.
And because they still have they took their original use, they got that out of it. They have agricultural use, they can go back. Now they can go with one additional use. That's at least 3 different options they have on this remaining portion.
So, if I could ask a question, because I'm not quite well versed in this, and maybe Commissioner Weaver, you're the best to answer this. I'm a farmer, I'm going for a loan. My loan collateral is based on the value of my property. My property value is based on what's allowed there, even beyond agriculture. Would this diminish that property value and make it harder for them to get the $300,000 loan for a new combine or other things that they would need, whether they intend to develop it or not?
It's about 800,000 today.
Okay, well, then that's even more money that they would need to have collateral up against. So would limiting these uses so much of what they can do devalue their property so as to lending now may be more challenging for them because they don't have the value on their property that they would have put up against collateral
So it
for
could have a
those.
negative effect.
Correct.
If they're that tight on this, they shouldn't be given the loan anyway. It's not gonna work. I'm sorry.
And I don't know.
But following along with
I
what
see
Linda's
your
saying,
point.
though, there's also the potentially unintended consequence related to the ag preservation program. So like we've talked about is that we've revised the program, we're accepting remaining portions for application, right? The value of that easement that we would purchase is based on the value of the property. And right now, we're looking at, you don't have any residential potential, but you'd have currently unlimited commercial as allowed, right? If we limit that down to 1, the value of that property comes down even more, and the amount of money that could be given to them for that preservation
To a
would go down.
degree, but our property values, especially agricultural property values, have about doubled in the last 2 years from where they were. And presently, they're around 20,000 an acre. They're hitting up in that area. It's just open agricultural ground. And we're talking only remainders here, so you're not talking that much money anyway. If it's a 25-acre remainder, you're not going to be that, and they're not going to buy an $800,000 combine.
I don't know, that's why I'm asking the
So what I'm
question.
looking at is trying to keep those conditional uses in the one area and just limit these out here to 1. And because they already have the other use, and they could go into preservation. I think there's, JP's working on a program to allow that to happen. So that would be the residential difference here.
Yeah.
They get that money back. So you're not really taking anything away from them. They have other ways to recoup that, to balance out that money, whether it's the residential value or as well as the land value. And even in ag pres, that land's worth just as much in preservation as it was without it. And
Well, see, that's the point, though, is that the purpose of the preservation is to offset the development potential.
Yeah, and this
So
is-
if we eliminate the development potential,
Are we putting into ag pres?
amount of money that we would pay to put it into preservation is going to decrease.
But the idea here was that we did have remainders, that they were to be the original preservation. They've already taken the development off. The remainder was to be a natural preservation. Now we're giving that natural preservation all these other uses, and we
Well,
defeat our own purpose and why it was
Actually,
there.
Commissioner, they already have those other uses. We're not taking them away from them. Those remaining portions right now already have those extra uses on the property. We're not giving them 1 or 2. They're there already. It's just, we're trying to limit the number of them.
Yeah, and that's what we have to. Thank you. Plus, they still have a chance now to go back into the preservation program. So we're not limiting them 100% on this.
Thanks for mentioning JP, because he's being very much challenged with the limited amount of acreage we have left. And he has to be even more creative to obtain that
We need
goal.
22,000 acres. Looks like it's 23,900, 24,000 on here.
Commissioner?
Could you just this way?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, the vast majority are 9 acres or less.
Yep. Or you wouldn't even get one under our, or you would get one under our scenario. So that's, you know, what we've been talking about. And then very few are between 10 and 40 even, and then equal for the 40 and above.
It puts it in perspective.
So I guess my question is, what problem are we trying to solve with restricting it so much more? When it's self-limited, so.
I don't think there's much. But Commissioner Weaver, you do. You're trying to limit it to one.
Mm-hmm.
And like Linda said, I guess the right word would be self-correcting.
Self-limiting, yeah.
It's already there without even putting a rule in place, because there's only so much property that is 40 and above.
So we have, what, 200 properties over 40 acres?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Okay, so that's 200 properties that would get 3. That would be enough to make significant impact in the ag press here, so, anyway. What I'd like to see is that hold the point on that at this point, and, you know, you already, keep in mind, you already sold your lots, you've made your money, now you've, keep coming back, and as long as we allow it, our zoning is going to continue to whittle at this ground with other things, and we're limited. What do we want the county to look like in 50 years?
This is limiting it, though. This is limiting, right now it's unlimited. This will cut it down. It won't cut it down to 1, but this will cut it
We'll
down.
cut it down to 1, and then we'll go from there.
So why not, why not cut it down to 1 if the intent of ag remainders is, like you said, to have bite apple, and that's it?
Yeah.
Because if we still want to maintain our goal of getting to 100,000 acres,
You still got 3 bites here.
we're not going to get there. I mean, we're just not. I
Yeah.
mean, and, yeah, go ahead. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
well, I was just going to say, I would submit, though, looking from a property owner perspective, that their apple that they're taking bites from was, I can have my 7-lot subdivision and then another parcel for a community amenity of some sort, like a church and so on. So that's kind of their total apple. So it's not like they took the bite and then they're done.
And then they can still go with the ag press with the rest.
That's always an option, yes.
So, yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
here's 1, 2, 3 bites at the apple, which is, that's significant, I
Yeah.
would think.
Yeah.
Anybody would like to have 3 chances before they're out. But I would think that would be more than fair, I think, to most people. Property rights, everything falls into there.
Because what you're also saying, you know, and I agree with you, is that we have a goal, a very significant goal of getting to 100,000 acres. We're a little over 3/4 the way there. In order for us to come close to achieving that goal, we have to have as much opportunity as possible, while we're still giving property owners their rights. And this would do both of that. If we give them more rights by going even up to 3, it's lessening the opportunities to preserve agriculture.
But we're not giving them more rights. You're actually
Right.
restricting the rights that they have right now.
I know.
Yes. Yeah.
So let's restrict it to 1.
Okay, I just want to make that
Yeah,
clear.
okay,
We're
yeah,
not
yeah,
giving
right.
them more, we're taking away, but you want to take it down to 1. And that, okay, just,
Yeah,
okay.
okay, yeah.
You okay with that?
Not really, but. But if you guys want to do that, I don't see, I mean, I see your point completely.
Thank you.
And
That's a big step
so,
for you.
I like what's on here, because there aren't that many that you could give 2 or 3 to. You just look at, they're
Yeah,
just
look at the
hardly
chart.
any. Yeah,
That makes
but
it,
I understand what you're saying.
it makes significant difference throughout the county when you start looking at 200 or whatever number of properties, 500. never how it comes out. That's a lot. When you spread that out, that starts making a big difference. Traffic, everything else.
That's a good question. So would they become non-conforming?
Non-conforming.
So, here's a question. If you do this and a remainder already has 5 uses on it, would those uses become non-conforming
Yes,
uses?
that's correct.
Okay.
And Chris, does this have any impact on the community solar, or would this still be?
No, that would
No,
have
it
to
would
be
not.
allowed on.
But
So, community solar.
Well, that would be the one use they would have, though.
Yep,
Even
okay.
though it's
Because it's
community
not-
It's
solar,
community solar, it has to go into preservation
Right.
and the rest of it, so that is their use.
Except for when they remove.
That's
the
their one
solar.
use, yeah.
After 20 years.
Okay.
When they remove it, yeah, in 20
When they
years.
remove the solar
when
in
they
20
remove-
years, then that area that was solar is now
Would,
developable.
with one use,
with one use.
by this chart.
By
It
this
would be
chart with
by- it'd
one
be
use,
20
yes.
acres, yes,
Yeah.
That'll be in the 2044 master plan.
yes.
No, and I
You're
like-
coming back to do that one.
No,
Yeah, I like that.
Chris will
And-
still be here.
You know, you could skip 4 years and come back, so they
So,
want you.
so limiting it to one use, outside of ag, regardless of size.
Second.
All
Are we,
right.
I mean, are we good with that? Is this, I mean, we're not voting on anything, but we're kind of giving guidelines to move ahead, right? So,
Well,
This'll
put
be
it
what-
down there and see what the public hearing has to say about it.
That's a good point.
okay.
Nothing's etched in stone yet.
Right.
We do need feedback from the public.
Okay, so we will do that. That was the last item. I just went 4 minutes over my time spread. I know, Chris, you totally did that, so now I probably owe you lunch. All right, I gotcha. All right. So just a few next steps. Well, one thing I'd like to ask is we would like to request to go to public hearing. And we'd like to request that for September 22nd. Do we need a vote for that?
Don't need to say that, but you should have a vote to go to
Yeah.
public hearing.
Motion to go to public hearing?
Yeah, I'll second the motion to go to public hearing.
If I could just interject one thing.
20 seconds.
Um,
Go ahead.
Are you allowed to
Setting-
inject as there's a
Well-
motion and a second?
I'm sorry, I can wait.
Go ahead.
When the public hearing can occur is driven in part by the county attorney and their ability to get ads in the paper and all of that. So there may not be enough time for sure for that date, so.
But they
if I-
weren't gonna put it in
We're
the
not,
date.
we're not talking about the date. All we're doing is requesting
My
to go to public
apologies, I was
hearing.
going off of the date
That's right.
that was on your.
No, but, and I would like to request September 22nd if we can. And Chris, we have plenty of time. We've already
Okay,
gotten, thank you, I appreciate that, but we've already gotten the time and
Yeah,
it's fine.
let's just go with, go to public hearing, and then you can work out the details, and we can go from there.
Okay?
Okay? So I have a motion, I got a second for this to go to public hearing, period. All in favor?
Aye.
And then our game plan is to have 2 public hearings, one in person during your regularly scheduled work, your business meetings, and then a virtual evening meeting like we did last time for the residential, having a virtual public hearing. That worked very well to do that. And that way we cover 2, those that can't come during the day and those that don't want to have to travel to Westminster. And we would have that start at 7 PM at night. Then we've programmed in a follow-up from the public hearing and work session, and then final legislation. So we've programmed in 2 additional work sessions for any loose ends, and then adoption on after that.
Sounds great. I have a motion to adjourn.
actually, I'm sorry.
Second.
That's the second time he's done this to us.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
He wants to earn
so-
that lunch that Linda's buying.
Exactly.
Or not.
So the board has already approved, we're going through the Chapter 155 administrative changes. You all have already approved us going to public hearing on that. The county attorney has not set that date yet, and they're working on that. There's the potential that it could be the same date as this. Would that be a positive thing or a negative thing to have both 155 and 158 public hearing on the same date?
Well, you'll also have this
Have this
155, so
so
you'll
I'll
have
probably do
2
it at the same time.
155s.
It'll
on the
probably
same-
go all together.
So work to get it, do it all,
I think
That's what I would expect.
rip the Band-Aid off
No, that's
all
what
once.
again, that's what I would
Match
expect, and
up
I
for
think that would come
155.
through staffing to determine that's the best avenue, but yeah.
There's no legal issues with that, is there?
We've had more than one public hearing on the same day.
Sure.
Okay, are there more discussions?
I'll shut up
Chris?
now.
Gag
No,
him.
Don't shut up. Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm
You
done.
positive?
Yes,
Okay,
Are you done?
yes.
Because you work for Chris.
we all work
We
for Chris.
serve for,
He has a big dog, of course we work for.
I've
Okay.
heard.
I got a motion, I got a second. Any further discussion? Seeing, hearing none, all in favor?
Hi.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.